The bathroom door slammed open, and my heart stopped as Dad's shadow loomed in the steam. Ethan's hand froze on my shoulder. The shower's hot water no match for the ice in my veins. In that split second, I knew our fragile, beautiful secret was about to shatter. My name is Lucas Bennett, and I'm 18, living in a sleepy Ohio suburb where everyone knows your business before you do. It's the kind of place where picket fences hide whispered gossip, and being different feels like a crime. Ethan Parker, my best friend since we were kids chasing fireflies, was always the one person who made this town bearable. We'd grown up sharing everything: comic books, bike rides, dreams of escaping to a city where we could be ourselves. But lately, ourselves had started to mean something more, something dangerous. It started innocently enough. 6 months ago, during a late-night study session in my basement. Ethan's laugh, brighter than the flickering TV, made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. When our hands brushed reaching for the same soda can, neither of us pulled away. That night, under the hum of cicadas outside, he kissed me. It was quick, clumsy, and perfect, like the world had finally clicked into place. We didn't talk about it after, but we didn't need to. Every stolen glance, every accidental touch, said enough. We were careful. God, we were so careful. In a town like ours, where church sermons preached love but meant judgment, we hid in plain sight. Sleepovers became our sanctuary, the only place we could be us. My bedroom, with its creaky floorboards and faded superhero posters, was where we whispered promises and planned a future far from here. But that night in the shower, our first reckless mistake changed everything. It was a Friday, the summer heat still clinging to August. Dad was supposed to be at his night shift at the auto shop, and Mom was at her book club. Ethan and I had the house to ourselves, or so we thought. We'd been joking around, splashing water, laughing louder than we should have. The shower was just a moment of stupid, carefree joy until it wasn't. Dad's early return, his shout of my name, the way his eyes widened with shock and then hardened with something darker, it's burned into me. Lucas, what the hell is this? His voice was a blade, cutting through the steam. Ethan stepped back, water dripping from his hair, his face pale. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat locked tight. Dad's gaze darted between us, and I saw it. The moment he realized this wasn't just boys being boys. This was something he couldn't unsee. He didn't yell, not at first. He just pointed to the door, his hand shaking. Get out. Both of you. Now. We scrambled for towels, my hands clumsy, my mind racing. Ethan's eyes met mine, full of fear, but also a quiet strength that kept me from falling apart. We dressed in silence, the weight of what was coming pressing down like a storm cloud. Downstairs, Dad was pacing the living room, his work boots leaving smudges on Mom's clean floor. Ethan stood by the couch, his shoulders hunched, while I sat on the edge of an armchair, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Explain, Dad said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How do you explain love to someone who's already decided it's wrong? I'm sorry, I stammered, hating how small I sounded. Ethan's hand twitched, like he wanted to reach for me, but he didn't. Dad's eyes narrowed, and I braced for the explosion. But instead, he turned to Ethan. You. Out of my house. Don't come back. The words hit like a punch, and Ethan flinched but nodded, his jaw tight. As he grabbed his jacket and walked out, he glanced back at me, a silent promise, we'll figure this out. The door closed, and Dad turned to me, his face a mix of anger and something worse, disappointment. We're going to talk about this, Lucas. Tomorrow. You're not leaving this house until we do. I nodded, numb, and escaped to my room. Alone, I stared at the ceiling, Ethan's scent still lingering on my pillow. My phone buzzed with a text from him. I'm okay. We'll be okay. I love you. I clutched the phone, tears burning my eyes, knowing nothing would ever be the same. That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment our first kiss, our whispered dreams. The way Ethan's smile made the world feel safe. But now, with Dad's words echoing in my head, I wondered if love was worth this pain. Was it worth losing my family, my home, everything I'd known? As dawn crept through my window, I made a choice. I wasn't giving up on Ethan. Not now. Not ever. But how do you fight for love when the people you need most are the ones standing in your way? The next morning, the house felt like a battlefield. Mom was in the kitchen, her usual chatter replaced by a tense silence as she poured coffee. Dad sat at the table, his jaw set, staring at his untouched mug. I hovered in the doorway, my stomach twisting. I'd spent the night texting Ethan, his words the only thing keeping me grounded. We're stronger than this, he'd written. But standing there, facing Dad's unreadable expression, I wasn't so sure. Sit, Dad said, not looking at me. I obeyed, the chair scraping louder than it should have. Mom glanced over, her eyes soft but worried, like she was trying to piece together a puzzle with missing parts. Your father told me what happened, she said, her voice careful. Lucas, we just want to understand. Understand. The word felt like a trap. How could I make them see that Ethan wasn't a phase, a mistake, or a sin? He was my heart. I love him, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. Dad's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. Don't say that, he snapped. You're 18. You don't know what love is. His words stung, but I held his gaze, my hands clenched under the table. I know what I feel, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Ethan's not just my friend. He's everything. Mom's hand froze on her coffee mug, and Dad leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. This isn't how we raised you. This isn't right. The air grew heavy, suffocating. I wanted to scream that love wasn't something you could raise out of someone, but Mom spoke first. Give us time, Lucas, she said, her voice breaking. We're not saying we don't love you. We need time. Time. It sounded reasonable, but it felt like a delay to an inevitable fight. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and retreated to my room. My phone buzzed Ethan again. Meet me at the creek. Our spot, a hidden bend of water behind the old mill, where we'd spent countless summers skipping stones and dreaming. I didn't hesitate. The creek was a 10-minute bike ride, the late morning sun filtering through the trees. Ethan was already there, sitting on a flat rock, his knees pulled up, staring at the water. His black hair glinted in the light, and when he saw me, his smile was small but real. You okay? He asked, standing as I dropped my bike. I shook my head, and he pulled me into a hug, his arms steady despite everything. We'll get through this, he whispered. Together. We sat by the creek, the sound of water calming the chaos in my head. Ethan told me about his mom, who'd always been more open-minded than my parents. She knows about us, he said, tossing a pebble into the stream. She's not thrilled, but she's not kicking me out. Said we need to be careful, though. Careful. That word again. I hated it. Hated how it made our love feel like a crime. What if my parents never come around? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's hand found mine, his fingers warm and sure. Then we make our own family, he said. You and me. We don't need their permission to be us. His words were a lifeline, but they couldn't erase the fear gnawing at my fear of losing my parents. My home. My place in this world. Back home, the tension hadn't eased. Dad barely spoke to me, and Mom kept trying to bridge the gap with small talk that felt forced. Over the next few days, I avoided them, sticking to my room or sneaking out to see Ethan. We'd meet at the creek, the library, anywhere we could steal a moment. Each time, his touch reminded me why this fight was worth it. But whispers were spreading. At school, kids stared. Someone scrawled a slur on my locker. Ethan's teammates on the soccer team started giving him the cold shoulder. Our town, once just boring, was turning hostile. One night, I overheard my parents arguing. Mom's voice was sharp, pleading. He's our son, Tom. We can't push him away. Dad's reply was quieter, but it cut deeper. I can't accept this. I won't. I stood frozen outside their door, my heart pounding. Was this it? Was I going to lose them for good? I texted Ethan, my hands shaking. I don't know how much longer I can do this. His reply was instant. You're not alone. I'm here. The next day, Ethan had an idea. Let's talk to Pastor Mike, he said. He's younger, more open. Maybe he can help your parents see things differently. I was skeptical. Church had never felt like a safe place for me, but Ethan's hope was infectious. We made a plan to meet the pastor after Sunday service, hoping for a miracle. But as we walked into the church, hand in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a lion's den. The church smelled of polished wood and old hymnals, a scent that always made me uneasy. Ethan squeezed my hand as we waited in Pastor Mike's office, a cramped room lined with books and a single stained glass window casting colored light. Pastor Mike, barely 30, had a reputation for being progressive in our conservative town. But as he sat across from us, his kind eyes studying us carefully, I felt exposed, like we were asking for permission to exist. Lucas, Ethan, he began, his voice gentle. I'm glad you came to me. I know this can't be easy. Ethan explained everything: our relationship, the shower incident, my parents' reaction. I stayed quiet, my throat tight, waiting for judgment. Pastor Mike leaned back, thoughtful. Love is complicated, he said, but it's also a gift. The Bible talks about love being patient and kind. I think that applies here, don't you? His words were a flicker of hope, but they didn't erase the reality waiting outside. He agreed to talk to my parents, to try bridging the gap, but warned us it wouldn't be quick or easy. People need time to unlearn fear, he said. As we left, Ethan's hand brushed mine, a silent thank you. For the first time, I felt like we had an ally. But allies were scarce. At school, the whispers grew louder. A group of Ethan's teammates cornered him after practice, their words cruel and sharp. Fag. One spat, loud enough for others to hear. Ethan didn't fight back, just walked away, his shoulders tense. When he told me later, his voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the hurt. They don't matter, he said, but I knew they did. This town was chipping away at us. I started noticing other things: how Mom's hugs lingered longer, like she was afraid I'd disappear. How Dad avoided my eyes, his silence louder than any argument. One evening, I found Mom crying in the kitchen, a photo of me as a kid in her hands. I just want you to be happy, she whispered when I asked what was wrong. But I'm scared for you, Lucas. Her fear was a weight I hadn't expected, heavier than Dad's anger. Ethan and I kept meeting at the creek, our refuge. One afternoon, as we lay on the grass, the sun warm on our faces, he turned to me. What if we left? He asked, his voice serious. After graduation. Just you and me. Somewhere new. Chicago. Maybe. Somewhere we can be ourselves. The idea was intoxicating, a fresh start. No secrets. But it also terrified me. Leaving meant cutting ties. Maybe forever. Could I do that to my family? That night, Pastor Mike came over. Dad was reluctant, sitting stiffly on the couch. But Mom convinced him to listen. Pastor Mike spoke calmly, weaving scripture with stories of acceptance, challenging Dad's beliefs without accusing him. God's love doesn't exclude, he said. Dad's face softened, just for a moment, but then he stood abruptly. I need time, he muttered, walking out. Mom squeezed my hand, her eyes apologetic. It wasn't a win, but it wasn't a loss either. School became a battlefield. Ethan's teammates escalated their harassment, shoving him in the locker room, spreading rumors. I wanted to protect him, but I was just as much a target. One day, someone spray-painted "queer" across Ethan's car. He laughed it off, scrubbing it clean with me in his driveway. But I saw the strain in his smile. We're tougher than they think, he said, but I wondered how much more we could take. At home, Dad started talking to me again. Short sentences about school or dinner, but never about Ethan. It was progress, I told myself, but it felt like walking on eggshells. Mom, meanwhile, started asking questions, careful ones, about how Ethan and I met, what he meant to me. I told her about our first kiss, leaving out the details, and her eyes softened. He makes you happy, she said. Not a question. I nodded, tears prickling. For the first time, I felt like she saw me. Ethan and I clung to our plan: graduate, leave, build a life. But as winter approached, the weight of our town's judgment grew heavier. A local store refused Ethan's service, the owner muttering about sin. Kids at school started avoiding us, their parents' prejudices seeping into them. Even the creek felt less safe, like the town was closing in. But every night, Ethan's texts kept me going. I love you. We're almost there. One evening, I found a letter under my door, Dad's handwriting. My heart raced as I opened it, expecting the worst. Instead, it was short, almost curt. I'm trying. Lucas. I don't understand, but I'm trying. It wasn't acceptance, but it was something. I clutched the letter, hope flickering despite everything. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through this. Winter blanketed our town in snow, but the cold outside was nothing compared to the chill at home. Dad's letter had sparked a fragile hope, but his trying was inconsistent. Some days he'd ask about my classes. Others he'd retreat into silence. Mom was our bridge, pushing for small steps forward, like inviting Ethan over for dinner. Dad agreed, reluctantly, and I held my breath as Ethan stepped through our door, his smile nervous but warm. Dinner was awkward, the clink of silverware louder than our stilted conversation. Ethan tried, talking about soccer, school, anything neutral. Mom smiled, asking him about his college plans. But Dad barely spoke, his eyes fixed on his plate. When Ethan mentioned applying to art schools in Chicago, Dad's fork paused. Chicago's far, he said, his tone unreadable. I gripped Ethan's hand under the table, my heart pounding. It wasn't much, but it was a start. School, though, was getting worse. The harassment escalated. Anonymous notes in my locker, snickers in the halls. Ethan's car was keyed again, this time with a slur scratched deep into the paint. He didn't laugh it off this time. He just stared at it, his hands shaking. They want us gone, he said, his voice low. I pulled him into a hug, right there in the school parking lot, not caring who saw. Then we'll go, I said. Together. We started planning in earnest, saving money, researching apartments in Chicago. Ethan's mom was supportive, slipping him extra cash from her waitressing tips. My parents didn't know about our plans, and I wasn't ready to tell them. Every time I thought about leaving, guilt twisted in my chest. Mom was trying so hard. And Dad, he was trying too, in his own way. But staying here, where every day chipped away at us, wasn't an option. One night, Ethan showed up at my window, his face pale. "My dad's back," he said, climbing inside. His father, who'd left when Ethan was 10, had a history of showing up unannounced, usually drunk and angry. "He saw me with you at the creek last week. He knows." My stomach dropped. Ethan's dad wasn't like mine. His anger wasn't silent. It was loud, violent. "He called me a disgrace," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. I held him, my mind racing. We had to get out, sooner than planned. The next day, we skipped school and went to the creek, our safe haven. Ethan was quieter than usual. His usual spark dimmed. "I'm scared, Lucas," he admitted, his head resting on my shoulder. Not of him, but what if this is all we get? Hiding, running, fighting. I kissed his forehead, my heart aching. "We'll have more," I promised. "We'll have a life where we don't have to hide." But trouble followed us. That evening, Ethan's dad showed up at his house, drunk and shouting. Ethan's mom called me, panicked, asking me to get Ethan out. I raced over on my bike, my heart in my throat. Ethan was outside, his lip bleeding, his dad's truck peeling out of the driveway. "I'm okay," he said, but he wasn't. I took him to my house, Mom's face paling when she saw him. She cleaned his cut, her hands gentle, and for the first time, I saw her look at Ethan like he was family. Dad was at work, but when he came home and saw Ethan on our couch, his expression hardened. "What's he doing here?" he asked. I explained, my voice steady despite the fear. "He's not safe at home right now." Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He just nodded and went upstairs. Mom stayed with us, her presence a quiet comfort. That night, Ethan slept in my room, his hand in mine, and I realized something. We were building our own family, piece by piece. The next week, Pastor Mike called. He'd been meeting with Dad, talking about love, faith, and acceptance. "He's struggling," Pastor Mike said, "but he's listening." I wanted to believe him, but every day brought new challenges. At school, a teacher overheard the slurs thrown at us and did nothing. Ethan's dad sent threatening texts, demanding he fix himself. The pressure was suffocating, but Ethan's hand in mine kept me grounded. We started counting down the days to graduation, our escape plan taking shape. Chicago felt like a beacon, a place where we could breathe. But as the snow melted and spring crept in, I couldn't shake the feeling that our town wasn't done with us yet. Something was coming, and I wasn't sure we were ready. Spring brought new life to our town, but for Ethan and me, it felt like the calm before a storm. The harassment at school hadn't stopped. Slurs scrawled on our lockers, whispers following us like shadows. Ethan's dad was a looming threat, his texts growing more erratic. Yet, amidst the chaos, there were glimmers of hope. Mom started inviting Ethan over more often, and Dad, though still distant, didn't protest. It was progress, fragile but real. One afternoon, Ethan and I were at the creek, our plans for Chicago taking shape. We'd found a cheap apartment online, and Ethan had been accepted to an art school with a partial scholarship. "We'll make it work," he said, his eyes bright with determination. I wanted to believe him, but the weight of our town's judgment was heavy. Even the creek, our sanctuary, felt less safe after someone spray-painted a slur on the nearby bridge. At home, Mom was trying harder. She'd started reading about LGBTQ+ issues, leaving pamphlets on the kitchen counter like subtle hints. One night, she pulled me aside. "I talked to Pastor Mike," she said, her voice soft. "He thinks your father's coming around." Just be patient. Lucas. Patience was hard when every day felt like a battle. But I nodded, clinging to her words. Dad's progress was slower. He'd stopped avoiding me. But our conversations were surface-level school. Chores. Never Ethan. One evening, though, he surprised me. I saw Ethan's drawings at the school art show. He said, his tone neutral. He's talented. It was the first time he'd acknowledged Ethan without anger. I held on to that moment, small as it was. But outside our house, the world was less forgiving. Ethan's dad showed up at his soccer game, drunk and shouting. The coach had to escort him off the field, but not before he'd hurled insults that left Ethan shaken. I found him later in the locker room, his head in his hands. I can't keep doing this, he said, his voice breaking. I knelt beside him, my hand on his back. We're almost out, I said. Just a few more months. Graduation was our finish line, but the path was treacherous. A group of kids from school started following us, taunting us in the halls, on the streets. One night, they cornered us behind the diner, their words sharp and cruel. Ethan stepped in front of me, his voice steady. Leave us alone. They laughed, but they backed off. Later, in the safety of my room, he admitted, I was terrified. I kissed him, my heart swelling with pride. He was braver than he knew. Mom started pushing for more open conversations. One Sunday, she invited Pastor Mike and Ethan over for lunch. Dad was quiet, but he stayed, listening as Pastor Mike talked about love as a universal truth. Ethan shared his dreams of becoming an artist, his passion lighting up the room. Mom smiled, and even Dad's expression softened. For a moment, it felt like we were a family, not a battlefield. But Ethan's dad wasn't done. One night, he showed up at Ethan's house, banging on the door, demanding to see him. Ethan's mom called the police, and I raced over, finding Ethan outside, his face pale. He's getting worse, he said. I don't know what he'll do. We stayed at my house that night, Mom insisting Ethan sleep on the couch. Dad didn't argue, and I saw a flicker of concern in his eyes. The next day, we met with a school counselor, hoping for support. She was sympathetic but helpless. Our town's prejudices ran deep, and the school board wouldn't intervene. Keep your heads down, she advised. It was terrible advice, but we had no choice. We kept planning, saving every penny, dreaming of Chicago. Ethan's art became our escape, sketches of us in a city we'd never seen, free and happy. As graduation neared, the tension in town grew. A local church group started passing out flyers condemning sinful lifestyles, and our names were whispered in their meetings. Ethan's dad sent a final, chilling text, "You'll regret this." Fear clung to us, but so did hope. Mom hugged me one night, whispering, "I'm proud of you." Dad was still a work in progress, but her words carried me forward. We were closito freedom. The weeks before graduation were a tightrope walk. Ethan and I were counting down the days, our Chicago plans solidifying. We'd saved enough for a deposit on an apartment, and Ethan's scholarship was confirmed. But our town seemed determined to break us first. The church flyers multiplied, and someone threw a rock through Ethan's bedroom window. A note tied to it, "Leave." Ethan's mom filed a police report, but the cops were dismissive, calling it kids being kids. At school, the harassment peaked. A group of Ethan's former teammates ambushed him after practice, shoving him against a wall. I wasn't there, but when he showed up at my house, his cheek bruised, I felt rage like never before. "I'm fine," he insisted, but his eyes told a different story. I wanted to fight back, to scream at the world, but Ethan took my hand. "We're bigger than this," he said. "We're almost free." Mom was our rock. She started attending a support group for parents of LGBTQ plus kids, coming home with stories that gave me hope. One night, she showed me a photo of us as kids, Ethan and me, grinning, covered in mud from the creek. "You've always been each other's home," she said. Her words hit hard, reminding me what we were fighting for. Dad, though, was still a puzzle. He'd stopped shutting Ethan out, but he hadn't embraced him either. I caught him watching us sometimes, his expression unreadable. Ethan's dad was the bigger threat. After the rock incident, he started following Ethan, showing up at his work, the diner, the creek. Ethan's mom got a restraining order, but it didn't stop the fear. One night, we were walking home from the library when his dad's truck pulled up, headlights blinding us. "Get in," he slurred, his voice thick with anger. Ethan froze, but I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "Leave him alone," I said, my voice shaking but firm. He laughed, a cruel sound, and drove off. Ethan clung to me, his breathing uneven. "I can't stay here," he whispered. We decided to leave right after graduation. No delays. Mom helped us pack in secret, her support unwavering. She even gave us some of her savings, tears in her eyes. "I want you to be safe," she said. Dad knew something was up, but didn't ask. I wanted to tell him, to give him a chance to say anything, but the words never came. Graduation day arrived, a mix of relief and dread. Ethan and I walked across the stage, our diplomas symbols of freedom. But as we posed for photos, Ethan's dad appeared in the crowd, his eyes locked on us. My stomach dropped. We slipped away, hiding in the school gym, our hands clasped. "He won't stop us," Ethan said, his voice fierce. I nodded, but fear lingered. That night, we had a final dinner at my house. Mom had invited Ethan's mom, and to my shock, Dad helped set the table. It was tense, but there was a warmth I hadn't expected. Dad even asked Ethan about his art, his tone cautious but curious. When Ethan described his latest painting, a cityscape of Chicago, with two figures holding hands, Dad nodded, almost approvingly. It wasn't acceptance, but it was close. After dinner, Ethan and I went to the creek one last time. The water sparkled under the moonlight, and we sat on our rock, silent for a while. "This is where it all started," Ethan said, his voice soft. "You and me." I kissed him, the world fading away. We weren't just leaving a town. We were leaving fear behind. But as we walked back, headlights flashed in the distance, Ethan's dad's truck. My heart raced. We ran, but the truck followed, slow and menacing. We made it to my house, breathless, locking the door behind us. Mom was awake, her face pale when we told her. She called the police, but Ethan's dad was gone by the time they arrived. Dad came downstairs, his expression grim. "You're not safe here," he said, his voice low. It was the first time he'd acknowledged the danger, and it hit me. He cared. Maybe not the way I wanted, but he cared. We decided to leave that night. Mom helped us pack our bags, her hands trembling. Dad stood in the doorway, watching. As we headed for the door, he stopped me. "Lucas," he said, his voice rough. "Just be careful." It wasn't everything, but it was enough. I hugged him, tears burning my eyes. And then Ethan and I were gone, driving toward Chicago, toward a new life. The drive to Chicago was a blur of headlights and silence. Ethan's hand in mine as we left our town behind. The city skyline appeared at dawn, a promise of freedom that made my chest ache. We'd done escaped the suffocating judgment, the slurs, the fear. But as we pulled into a cheap motel, our savings barely enough for a week, reality hit. Freedom wasn't just a place. It was a fight we'd have to keep fighting. Our apartment was tiny, A fifth-floor walk-up with peeling paint and a view of a brick wall. But it was ours. Ethan hung his sketches on the walls, turning the space into a home. His art school started in a week, and I'd lined up a job at a coffee shop, the kind of place where no one cared who you loved. For the first time, we could hold hands in public, kiss without looking over our shoulders. It felt like breathing after years underwater. But the past wasn't done with us. Ethan's dad found our address, likely from a mutual acquaintance back home. He sent a letter, not threatening but cold, disowning Ethan completely. Ethan read it once, then tore it up, his face unreadable. "He doesn't get to define me," he said, but I saw the hurt in his eyes. I held him that night, promising we'd build a family that loved us for who we were. Back home, Mom kept in touch, texting photos of the creek, updates about Dad. He'd started going to Pastor Mike's support group, she said, wrestling with his beliefs. "He misses you," she wrote. I wanted to believe her, but the distance between us felt vast. Still, her texts were a lifeline, a reminder that not all ties were broken. Ethan threw himself into art school, his passion a light that kept us both going. His professors praised his work, and he started selling small pieces at local galleries. I'd watch him paint, his hands steady, creating worlds where we were free. My coffee shop job was grueling, but every paycheck brought us closer to stability. We were building something, slowly, together. One evening, Ethan surprised me with a candlelit dinner in our tiny kitchen takeout pizza, but it felt like a feast. To us, he toasted, his smile brighter than the city lights outside. We talked about the future marriage. Maybe. A house someday. A life where we didn't have to hide. It felt possible. Real. In a way it never had back home. But challenges came. Money was tight, and the city was expensive. I picked up extra shifts, and Ethan took a part-time job at an art supply store. Exhaustion crept in, and we argued sometimes small, sharp fights about bills or time apart. But we always came back to each other. Apologies whispered in the dark, hands clasped. Love wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Mom visited a month later, her first time in Chicago. She hugged us both, tears in her eyes, and toured Ethan's school, marveling at his art. Over coffee, she told me Dad was changing, slowly. "He keeps your room the same," she said. "I think he's waiting for you to come back." The thought stung, but it also warmed me. Maybe there was a bridge back to him. Someday. Ethan's dad was another story. He showed up at the art school one day, sober but angry, demanding Ethan come home and fix this. Ethan stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. "This is my home," he said, gesturing to me. His dad left, defeated, and Ethan collapsed into my arms, shaking. "I'm done with him," he said. And I believed him. As fall settled over Chicago, we found our rhythm. Friends from Ethan's school became our chosen family, their acceptance a balm for old wounds. We went to pride events, tentative at first, then bold, our hands linked, our love on display. Every step felt like a victory, every kiss a defiance of the past. One night, I got a call from Mom. "Your dad wants to talk," she said. My heart raced as I put the phone on speaker, Ethan beside me. Dad's voice was hesitant, rough. "I don't understand everything," he said, "but I don't want to lose you, Lucas." It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Tears streamed down my face as Ethan squeezed my hand. We were building a future, not just for us, but for everyone we'd left behind. Chicago's winter was brutal, but it couldn't touch the warmth Ethan and I had built. Our apartment, once bare, was now a patchwork of our lives. Ethan's canvases on the walls, my books stacked on a secondhand shelf, a photo of us at the creek pinned to the fridge. We were learning what it meant to be us, Not just in secret, but in the open, where love didn't need to hide. Dad's call had changed something. He started texting, awkward messages about his day, the auto shop, even asking about Ethan's art. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a door cracked open. Mom visited again, bringing a quilt she'd made, her way of saying she was all in. "Your dad's reading those pamphlets I left out," she confided, a smile in her voice. I could picture him, stubborn but curious, trying to understand. Ethan's art was gaining attention. A local gallery offered him a solo show, a big deal for a freshman. I helped him prepare, framing his paintings, each one a story of User Town, our struggles, our love. The night of the show, he was nervous, his hands fidgeting as people milled around, praising his work. I stood by him, proud, watching him shine. One painting, a vibrant cityscape with two figures holding hands, sold for enough to cover our rent for months. "We're doing this," he whispered, his eyes bright. I kissed him, not caring who saw. But the past wasn't entirely gone. Ethan's dad sent one last letter, an apology of sorts, claiming he'd changed. Ethan didn't respond. He had his chance, he said, tossing the letter in the trash. I admired his strength, but I knew it hurt. We talked about it late into the night, curled up on our couch, promising to be each other's family, no matter what. School and work kept us busy, but we carved out time for us walks along Lake Michigan, late-night diner runs, moments where the city felt like ours. We made friends, a tight-knit group who didn't blink at our love. They threw us a surprise party for our first anniversary, a year since that first kiss in my basement. Ethan gave me a sketch that night, of us at the creek, our faces lit by fireflies. "This is where we began," he said. "But this," he gestured to our life, "our home, this is where we're going." Dad visited in the spring, his first time in Chicago. I was nervous, but Ethan was calm, greeting him with a handshake that felt like a truce. We showed him our apartment, Ethan's school, the gallery where his art hung. Dad was quiet, taking it all in. At dinner, he finally spoke. "I was wrong," he said, his voice low. "I thought I was protecting you, Lucas, but I was pushing you away. I'm sorry." Tears welled in my eyes, and Ethan's hand found mine under the table. "I love him, Dad," I said. He nodded, a small smile breaking through. "I see that." It wasn't perfect. Dad still struggled, his faith and love at odds, but he was trying. He hugged me before he left, a real hug, and shook Ethan's hand again, this time with warmth. As we watched him drive away, Ethan pulled me close. "We did it," he said. And we had not just survived, but built something beautiful. Years later, we look back on that summer, the shower, the fear, as the moment that broke us open but also set us free. We got married in a small Chicago ceremony, Mom crying happy tears, Dad walking me down the aisle, his pride quiet but real. Ethan's art graced galleries across the city, and I found my place teaching, helping kids like us feel seen. Our town changed too. Slowly, Pastor Mike's church started a support group, and the creek became a place where others could find refuge. Love didn't erase the pain, but it carried us through. That night in the shower, when Dad's shout shattered our world, I thought we'd lost everything. But we hadn't. We'd found each other, and in doing so, we'd found ourselves. As Ethan and I stood on our balcony, the city sparkling below, I knew this was the ending we'd fought for, a love that didn't just survive, but thrived, lighting the way for others to follow.